Hey everyone, just a heads up that the Buy That Guitar podcast will be taking a little break next week. But don't worry, we'll be back the following week with our exciting season finale. The official Vintage Guitar Magazine 2025 price guide has partnered with 33 of the top guitar dealers in the industry to provide the most accurate values for thousands of models. This includes electric guitars, acoustic guitars, basses, amplifiers, effects, mandolins, and banjos. Whether your instrument is an investment or simply a piece you enjoy playing, it's always helpful to know what it's worth. If you're checking out a guitar at your local shop and want to know its value before making the purchase, this guide is your go-to source for all the details. Available in both print and digital editions, you can have the guide right at your fingertips no matter where you go. Use code BUYGUITAR25 to receive 15% off the 2025 price guide when purchased directly from www.vintageguitar.com. Offer expires April 1st, 2025.
Hello and welcome to Buy That Guitar, presented by Vintage Guitar Magazine. I'm your host, Ram Tuli. This podcast is about the joy of guitar. That includes buying guitars, selling guitars, collecting guitars. We're talking vintage guitars, new guitars, used guitars, pre-war, flat tops, electric Spanish arch tops, custom shop guitars, limited edition guitars, basses, amps, effect pedals, lap steels, mandolins, banjo. If it has strings, we're going to talk about it. I spent most of my life studying the vintage guitar market. It's truly something I love and I'm passionate about. I can talk guitars all day, and I'm going to. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another thrilling and exciting edition of Buy That Guitar. Today, I'm with Michael Slubowski, and we're going to talk about the most beautiful and wonderful guitar of all, the Gibson Les Paul. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great, Ram.
You were probably like, why me? Why did I want to ask you to do this? And this is because when I'm discussing the various models, this season I'm doing all the models, and I really wanted to choose guests that were passionate about the guitar we're going to talk about. You know, that's why it was natural to have a guy like Fred Stuckey do the Gretches, Colin Whitley do Rickenbackers, Tom Guerra do Strats. And when I'm thinking of Les Paul, there's only one guy I want to do this with, and that was you. I think you have been educating people about Les Pauls for, 25, 30 years, and you're the perfect guy to do this podcast.
Well, I'm humbled to do this, and there are people who are way above my pay grade doing this, but happy to participate.
So when did you start playing guitar?
So I'm one of those kids that, turned Ed Sullivan on when the Beatles were on and said, I've got to play guitar. Mm-hmm. And so I started, when I was about 10. And my dad and my parents were both musically oriented. Dad played clarinet and harmonica. Mom played piano. So they thought it was great that kids, get involved in music. And my dad bought a guitar from a fellow at work for $10, and it was an acoustic guitar. And little did the guy know, or did we know until we showed up at the music store to have them look at it, that it was a 1934 Martin 017. Which even back in those days was already worth like $1,000. And my dad went back to the office because this fellow was a coworker and friend, and said, Ralph, there's no way I can, only pay you $10. This guitar is worth, $1,000. And Ralph looked at my dad and he said, Art, I bought this thing during the Depression and for $35 in a year's lessons. And if your son learns how to play, that's gift enough to me. And so he wouldn't take any more. Mm. So that was the start of it.
Do you still have that guitar?
I still have that guitar.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yep.
Perfect. I'm sure every time you play that guitar, there's just different memories and different feelings that come with
absolutely
playing something. Your first guitar. I have my first guitar too. So it's one of those things where it's not worth much, but I would never trade it for anything.
Yep, for sure.
When did you get involved with the Les Paul Forum?
I was one of the early participants with the Les Paul Forum. It started in 1999, actually. Mm-hmm. And, we were, a bunch of us were just kind of hanging out. It started kind of informally, and then someone took the reins to, develop a more refined website. And so I was a member for a long time. And then I'm trying to remember now, it had to be 7 or 8 years ago, maybe longer now, that the person who was managing and actually owned the website ended up with some hard times. And essentially it lights went out.
Mm-hmm.
And so three of us got together and said, is there some way we can figure out how to resurrect it? And I found the hosting site and begged them, if we gave them some money, would they, turn it back on again?
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of co-owning it, I guess. So
Yep.
it's been at least a decade.
It's without a doubt, for most of us that are guitar players, Les Paul Forum
Mm-hmm.
is probably the greatest resource out there for everything, not just Les Pauls, but just anything, Gibson or guitar related, a lot of like amplifier stuff. And you write most of the articles, don't you, that appear on there?
Well, I've written a lot of articles. I haven't been as active, in this past few years writing articles as I was earlier. But we just have been gifted over time with some very knowledgeable folks that have been willing to share, their learnings and experience. So it's a place to hang out. It's Floyd's barber shop, if you remember Andy Griffith.
Yeah. So I noticed Rob Lawrence. I was like looking at the other night, and I noticed that Rob Lawrence even puts articles in there, and he's one of my old friends.
Yep.
He knows
Rob's
a lot.
A friend. He's a great guy.
He's a great resource as well. And
Mm-hmm.
So let's, so we're talking about Les Paul.
Mm-hmm.
In the previous show, I talked with Tom. We talked about Stratocasters.
Mm-hmm.
A Stratocaster and the Les Paul are probably, anybody who collects guitars, they're going to have they should have at least one Les Paul, one Stratocaster in their collection. Two completely different guitars, yet I'd say the same amount of joy can be found from each one in a unique kind of a way.
Mm-hmm.
And since we focused so much on Les Pauls or on Stratocasters last week, I want to talk about Les Pauls this week. A very different guitar in that it evolved differently. Like it actually improved as it evolved, whereas the Stratocaster kind of, it came out perfect, and then when it evolved, it kind of lost value to a collector. But that's not true with the Les Paul. It seems like every iteration, and there's like maybe 5 or 6 iterations that really matter to the Les Paul collector. And I just wanted to go over a couple of those for the people that are listening to learn something. But just in general, is Les Paul your favorite guitar? Like if you're all alone and you want to plug something in that Princeton reverb, is it a Les Paul?
Probably 8 times out of 10, it would be a Les Paul. Yep.
And which one?
Well, I have a bunch of reissues and I've got a lot of vintage ones. So I kind of rotate through them, to be honest, Ram.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel, now this is, be honest, that like the store-bought R9, do you think it plays and feels better than an actual 1959 Les Paul?
Not to my hands and ears.
No.
No, I mean, when I take my vintage Les Pauls out, there's a magic about them. I don't know how to describe it. And, everything from the neck size to, the resonance of the pickups to, I don't know. They are special. I mean, of the vintage ones I pull out the most would be like a 55 gold top, a 57 gold top.
Right.
And one of the bursts.
Now, this is a secret, and I guess we might as well just tell everybody this right now. The 1955 Les Paul Gold Top with the P90s and the stop bar is the best sounding Les Paul ever made. And that's documented over and over in private conversations. I talk to everybody who has a vast array of guitars, Les Pauls. They always say, my favorite one is an all gold 1955 Les Paul. And I don't know what it was about those particular guitars, but there is something that's my best sounding Les Paul is my 1955, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the wrap over bridge is, awesome. And I don't seem to have any big intonation problems with playing it. So it's just fun.
It's like a Telecast. People say, oh, you have an intuition. And they're like, hey, do you think it matters? Now, let me ask you, one of the things I learned when I talk to people that sell guitars, and they always say people that buy or that play a lot of the R9s and R8s, when they play their first real 59 or 58, they're really taken aback at first because it doesn't feel or play like the reissue. But man, within a few minutes, they realize they really have something special that's completely different. And you were kind of talking about that earlier, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with that point. And again, a lot of people will jump right on, well, in a live situation with a band, who can tell the difference? I tell the difference when I'm playing, by myself,
right,
or with just a small group of folks in my studio. It's you can just tell the difference. And live situation, of course, that's a whole different kettle of fish. And frankly, these days I wouldn't take my vintage burst to a gig anyway,
Right. But if you have a reef-in Fender, you can. Like I take my reef-in Fenders out when I gig.
Sure.
And nobody knows. They just assume it's I just put it in a custom shop case. They don't know. They don't know it's a real thing.
Yeah, that's true.
But I know it's the real thing.
Mm-hmm.
I could feel the real thing. I can hear the real thing. Now, one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you, because you're one of the few guys I know, not only are you probably one of the nicest guys in the guitar world, but you're also a tone purist. Like, you understand tone. And when I wrote my Naked and Dime book, I remember you sent me a email saying, like, that you also agree that the Princeton Reverb was our desert island amp. Remember we were chatting about that Princeton Reverb. So you know that that the tone really comes from the guitar and the amp.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite amp with a Les Paul?
I mean, I like all of them, but like in my studio right now, and when we've gigged recently, I have a 64 Princeton Reverb and a 67.
So it is that Princeton Reverb. It has to be that small wattage blackface amp, huh?
Yeah, and then we mic them for gigs.
Right. In the old days, we had to bring in the loud stuff, but now we don't. Now you say you gig. Like, are you in a band? Or just...
Well, I have a band. I have a day job, but my band, we just do charity gigs, and we do some gigs for at my workplace, which we really enjoy. But the band is, they're talented, very talented musicians, way better than me. I always try to pick people who are better musicians than me because it ups my game.
Right.
And so I'm really loving this group that I'm with right now.
There really is no greater joy than making music with others. And, to me, I think that's the thing I missed most, is that my band, we really don't gig anymore. But that doesn't mean we won't,
Right.
Now, as far as the day job goes, you have a pretty important day job, and I know that I don't know if you want to share with us what it is, but you're actually have a pretty impressive day job.
Yeah, well, again, today's talk is about guitars, but
right.
I run a faith-based health system that is, we have hospitals and medical groups and all kinds of ambulatory services in 26 states. So it's very rewarding work, but it's also, very stressful. And so music is, really a great release.
Right. That's the thing. I think that's the greatest joy in the world, is to have the ability to make music and not worry about feeding yourself.
Yeah.
That was my greatest blessing when I had the psychedelic moods, is that we would do shows, and we usually were traveling groups that were starving, and we just, we're like, well, we have day jobs, and we could never leave those. We couldn't leave those day jobs. So that was as far as we went.
It's a blessing. Yeah.
Yep. So let's talk about Les Pauls. Now, in the Vintage Guitar Guide, I have over 612 Les Paul models that I have to give a price for every year. There's a lot. Like, when you talk about models, I think the Les Paul has more variations and models and price points than any other model ever made or invented by mankind. This goes from, anniversary models to you're talking about the R9s, R8s, R7s, and it's amazing. And most of those sales, most Les Paul sales, are really in that utility market. They don't pay a lot, but most of the collectors I know, they're kind of centered in that R8, R9, R0, R4 era. And so how do you compare those guitars to the actual models? Because you own each one, you own the real ones.
Yeah, well, it's been an obsession for me, and a couple of the guys that I play with, call me a completist. So, I own vintage Les Pauls from, 1952 through 1960 every year, one for every year at least. And I've got the Les Paul Customs, both the El Nico and the, humbucker version. And then, I've got some SGs, with the early SGs. Of course, they still called Les Pauls. So
right.
they've got the truss rod cover to say that. And then, I have a ton of reissue. Well, I've got some 70s and 80s and 90s, and then, the reissues when they started in 1993, or the custom shop started in 1993. But even before that, they were doing Les Paul reissues, as you know, in the 80s.
Right.
So,
it's amazing, to throw that word out, R9 is such a generic thing now because there are just so many variations of this R9. There's a Murphy age, there's a, this stores, and that stores. And for me, it's like a basic nightmare to try to keep track of. I get emails all the time. You don't have my model in the book.
Right.
And I'm like, well, what is it? And I'm like, and I say, well, actually it is. It's called, nobody knows what they're really called, the names of these things.
Right.
But it's always this confusion as to who made the R9. What is the R9? What is the R8?
Right.
And that was always, so I always tell people, well, when it comes to that, it's basically a reissue, right? It's just the reissue 1959, and that's the one people are happiest with because it has the 1959 features. And we'll get to that. We'll talk about what those are.
Sure.
So let's go year by year because that's kind of like where people are.
Sure.
As far as 1952, they launched this thing quickly because they're going to come after Leo Fender. He sold 1,000 something solid bodies. They're going to basically, they've been kind of dilly-dallying with this thing, but now they launched that thing. They launch it too quickly. There's some issues that need to be fixed right away. I guess the most important one was that tailpiece, the trapeze tailpiece.
Well, the trapeze tailpiece really isn't the issue. It's the neck angle.
Right.
That was too shallow.
Right.
So you had to string the strings under the stop bar instead of over it. That was the issue, and everybody complains about it because you can't palm mute it very easily.
Right.
Which, is a valid point, but I'm telling you, the 52s and the early 53s with that trapeze are heavenly rhythm guitars.
Oh yeah. Everything, it's all the same. That wood is worth the price you're paying, Yeah. And it's got the multi-section maple top, mahogany back and neck, goldfish. The very first ones didn't have neck binding, and they also didn't have serial numbers. And we know that they thought this was a passing fad. They didn't put serial numbers on them because they didn't think they were going to make them for very long. But they made almost 2,000 of these earliest versions. And that's why today, when you go online and you find a gold top for sale, it's 50-60% of the time, it's a 52 or early 53 that's been, it has had some neck work done and they put that other bridge on it. Or it just becomes a conversion. They actually just turn it into a conversion and put on 58, 59 hardware and pickups. So
yeah, that makes me sad. I like, the fact that, we're keepers of antiquity and,
you or I would never do that, but I know people did that. And sometimes you see horrible refins that people do and they convert them. But today, if you want that earliest gold top, it'll cost you about 30 or 40K. It's a great guitar for that money, without a doubt. No doubt about it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So the 1953, we get that wrap over bridge. The neck angle is now fixed a little bit. It's increased, and it will increase as it goes. They start putting serial numbers on the headstock. And then we changed to those barrel knobs. They reduce in size. But the price goes up now. It goes up to about 45. You'll have to pay at least 45 right now, up to about 55K for that. And that's the one, we're talking about that all the time. Those tailpiece, single piece wrap over bridges are really where it's at when it comes to these gold tops.
The really early 53s still had the trapeze. So
right, I know you have one.
My 53 has the trapeze on it.
And then 1954 is when the big changes happen, guitar wide. The Stratocaster comes out, but the Les Paul Custom is now launched. And this is just for some reason they put that mahogany carved top on because I think that's what Les Paul wanted originally for the gold top. But another thing is they add this Alnico V pickup at the neck, and they also, that's that first ABR1 bridge. So tell me what you have, a 54 early.
Actually, I have an early 57, but it's in essence is the 54 with the Alnico pickup. And I think that Alnico 5 is a really sweet pickup.
It's a completely different sound. I don't think people understand that it is not a P90 sound.
No.
And it works perfectly with that mahogany body. And that was meant to be a jazz aficionado type guitar, and it really is. It really does have a smooth flavor, a nice dark smoky flavor. Great. And here's you get the black finish, the multiply binding, the gold-plated hardware, split diamond inlay shows up on the headstock. So that's a great sounding guitar, but it's also going to be very heavy. Is yours very heavy?
My early 57 is not unbearably heavy. I gotta go and look at the weights again.
Mm-hmm. The ones I've played have been very
story
heavy.
with the 58 3 pickup. That is like a brick.
Yeah, they always joke that it's heavy. They had that meme where it's a black hole, and then the heaviest thing is even heavier than that was the late 50s as a custom. So,
right.
But these now they're going to cost about 38 to 55K. These are now they're still within strike for vintage guitar people. The coolest thing about 1954 also is they start launching the price. They have the high end, and they also put the low ends. And this is when that Les Paul Jr. is launched. This is just a single cut mahogany body. It's just the back part of it. There's no cap on it. And it comes with those P90s and a nice sunburst finish. And those things are tone monsters. Do you have a lot of those?
I had a single cut Les Paul Jr., but I sold it because I'm a 2 pickup kind of guy. But they are unique guitars. There's no question. And it worked for Leslie West. So.
Oh, yeah. And right now they're about $12K, and there's a holding. I think the price is going to hold and come down a little bit on those. But if you're trying to dip your toe into the Les Paul world, this is where you come in for vintage guitars, for vintage Les Pauls. Is this Junior? This thing was a great sounding, great guitar. It's a student model, but man, did that thing have tone.
They're fun.
The official Vintage Guitar Magazine 2025 price guide has partnered with 33 of the top guitar dealers in the industry to provide the most accurate values for thousands of models. This includes electric guitars, acoustic guitars, basses, amplifiers, effects, mandolins, and banjos. Whether your instrument is an investment or simply a piece you enjoy playing, it's always helpful to know what it's worth. If you're checking out a guitar at your local shop and want to know its value before making the purchase, this guide is your go-to source for all the details. Available in both print and digital editions, you can have the guide right at your fingertips no matter where you go. Use code BUYGUITAR25 to receive 15% off the 2025 price guide when purchased directly from www.vintageguitar.com. Offer expires April 1st, 2025.
And then also about the same time, you get the Les Paul TV model, which is essentially that same thing, but with a TV yellow finish. And that's much more expensive. Anything that's TV yellow in these days, and it's Gibson, it's going to be more money, quite a bit more money. TV yellow is just a magical look on that mahogany. And I guess the old folktale is that it looked better contrasted on black and white TV.
Right.
But I also heard that it's also because at that time, in that era, TV yellow was a popular furniture color. The 50s was just filled with TV yellow. What they call that pickle mahogany everywhere. That was just a popular color. And it did contrast really nicely on black and white TV. You actually saw the contrast of it. But also here in 1955, we get to all of a sudden now, this is when the big change happens on the gold tops, where we add that ABR1 bridge. It replaces that wrap over. Now this is going to change that price of that guitar quite a bit. You're going to have to pay about $85, almost up to $100 right now. And also we get the top hats changed to shape. You get that witch hat or whatever they call that, spin knob or whatever. Do you think that changes, that ABR really changes the tone on a Les Paul?
Yeah, I mean it has in my view, it has a little bit more resonance, than the stop bar. But and obviously, you can do more with intonation on it. So it was an innovation. I think it was a positive move.
So it's worth. I mean, the market does appreciate that ABR one because it costs much more. Almost 30, 40K more for it.
Yeah,
I know people that
crazy.
are tone purists. I'm not gonna say myself, but I call those ABR ones tone suckers. But I'm not gonna go there. I don't like them. I don't like them the way I love those stop bars, and I don't know why. I think it's just the sustain you get from the stop bar. And I'm not an intonation guy. I mean, people accuse me of playing out of tune all the time. Doesn't matter to me. I'm a string bender, and so that to me is, I don't cry about that. Les Paul Special comes out, and this is a great guitar. This is basically a no frills Les Paul The Les Paul Special is just a TV yellow. It has that rosewood board and a wraparound bridge, and it's you can get these about 16 to 20K, a little over 20K. Great guitars, aren't they?
Yeah, and they've got 2 pickups, which I like.
Yep. And when you by 2 pickups, do you change, like when you're playing, do you find yourself going back and forth between the 2?
During the songs, not usually, but depending on the song, I love playing off that rhythm pickup versus the treble pickup.
Right. Very different flavor for Les Pauls, those pickups, for sure.
Yes.
So by 1957, now it's going to cost you about $175,000 to $250,000 to get a gold top. And that's because the patent applied for pickups replaced those P90s. And that's the game changer right there, huh?
It is, for sure. And that's leading into this aura of pre-burst.
Right. Yeah. Like people that listen to this podcast series, when I talked to David Davidson, he told me that these were the most underrated right now, like most undervalued, were gold tops with PAFs. And he saw these only going up, and up. So if you're willing to throw that 175 to 200 down, I can't think of who needs a house?
Yeah, really. Yeah.
And the earliest PAFs, they had the black plastic parts because they basically just took this stuff from the custom and put it on there. And those are early ones. They're rare, but the market doesn't like them as much. They want the cream parts. You could save a little bit money. I think the black plastic parts on the gold top actually looks better. I don't know, but that's kind of cool. I think the black parts also have the dark backs, as they call them. A lot of those have the dark backs. So
yeah, I had a 58 gold top with a dark back, and I regret selling it. I sold it to a nice guy, but I still regret it to this day.
Mm-hmm. So 1957 also is when the custom switches to 3 humbucking pickups.
Yeah.
Now you're going to have to pay. You're going to have to pay over $100,000 now, and you'll have to double that if you get the one that has the 2 pickups, which would be ideal, right? Most people don't like that middle pickup. Do you like that middle pickup?
Not at all.
Yeah, I don't know.
And not only do I not like it because it gets in the way of your picking, but also the way they wired them. The middle pickup and the treble pickup are out of phase when you have the pickup selector in the middle position.
You get that quack.
And it's got that quacky sound, which it's limiting in my view. And the same thing, when you so you really have a single pickup guitar if you put it on the rhythm pickup or the treble pickup, because that middle switch position is out of phase. Yeah. So I don't like it.
Most people don't like that because of that middle pickup. It's worse on the SG specials that came out, because that you're literally scraping across a very low profile neck.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's just you're like, it's just clacking and quacking, and it's just. But in 1958 now, the Les Paul Standard is introduced. They changed it from Les Paul Model to Standard, and here we get that 2-piece center seam, maple top, cherry tint, blackened sides, and cherry sunburst, as they called it. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful guitar. Now you're going to have to pay about $275 up to about $550K for this thing. You have a 58. How do you compare the 58 to the 57?
Well, I mean, my 57 is a little unique because they built a few of them that were all mahogany. So my gold top 57 is all mahogany, and it's a pretty heavy guitar. And you notice the difference without the maple cap. The 58 is a little bit lighter, and mine is got a little bit of flame in it. It's not, I would not call it a flame top, but it's an awesome guitar, and it was definitely played by its previous owners. It's got some neck wear, which I appreciate, and I think the other thing that you and I talked about a little bit is everybody talks about the 58 versus the 59 and the neck size. I don't really see a big neck size difference in all 3 years of the burst, at least the ones I have.
Right. But you do see the frets change in 59 though, right?
Yeah. Again, mine has, smaller frets, the 59, and it's original. So I think, I don't know when they made the switch and or whether they moved back and forth depending on what was in the parts bin. So there are variations.
And I know that in the R8s kind of follow this, and the R9s follow this. So that the 58s really, they weren't really, they're not noted for the figure tops. Most of the time we see these, they call them plain tops, or they're just, and that red aniline dye just faded. It just soaks into the wood. Yes. Some of the 58s, they don't look like bursts. You take the pickguard off, you'll see there is red there. But other than that, but it's also sound wise, people say they sound very similar. It's just that they weren't really focused on that top yet. You get to 1959, now a lot of things happen here where the fret size is increased, the neck profile is less chubby, they say, but there's a tobacco, then they start adding in tobacco sunbursts and things like that. You're going to pay a little bit more for a 59. You're going to have to pay up to $300 to $750. People, like the last 3 that sold that I know of, because I keep track of it, many were in the 7s. Recent one, the 3 most recent sales are in the 7s.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah, so like I say, you don't need a house, people. You can just buy a 59 Les Paul. And I wish when I was a kid, I didn't worry about paying rent and having a car. I could have bought Telecasters and
That's right.
But live and learn. Anyways, these are great. 59s are, everybody wants them. These are the ones that when you talk about Les Paul's sunbursts, people point to this 59 because of the neck. Although as we pointed out, and we've pointed out in other shows, 58, 59, and 60, the necks, they do change a little, but you get used to it. Whatever it is you're playing, you're going to get used to it right away, and you're going to love it no matter what. But 19...
Yeah, I don't think there, Ram, we talked about it. I don't think there is a rule of thumb on the neck size. So I know that in the reissues, they tend to make the R8s bigger and the R9s, a little bit smaller, and then they go for the really thin, R0s, the 1960s that are sort of late 60. But, the reality, I can only speak to my 3 bursts. So my 58, 59, and 60 all have similar neck profiles. None of them have completely faded. So whoever owned them before me took good care of them. The 59 in particular is a really brilliant, cherry red, deep cherry red color in the sunburst. And the early 60s were all 59 parts and still had the red aniline dye that faded. So,
and that's in David Davidson told me that, like, if you can get a 1960, you might pay a little less for it, and it might have a nice neck. It might have that, it might have all the 59 features on it. But just because it's a because it has reflector type metal cap knobs or something, it changes the value.
Yeah, and again, the early 60s are all 59 features. They have the 59 knobs. They're the red aniline dye. They have the same neck size, and we call the early 1960s double O's, since the serial number starts with 0 and then 0 and a 3-digit number.
Yep, and that the one thing the 1960, like the big change, like there is a price drop from 59 to 60 for the 60 features, and that would include that what they call the tomato soup look, where they change from that less photoreactive dye, and it's now the red stays there, but it's got a tomato soup color to it. And a lot of those tomato soups have the very thin. They start getting the blade, what they call the blade necks, very thin, fast. They could call them fast necks. Do you have any Gibsons that have those blade necks on them?
Yes, I do. Probably the ones with the thinnest are, I have a couple of the Jimmy Page reissues. I have his the reissue of his number 2, and that's got a really, really thin neck.
Do you like that thin neck?
You can adapt to anything, like you said earlier. I've got guitars with all kinds of neck sizes. I prefer something a little chunkier, but I can play the thin neck.
Yeah, I will admit that I don't like, I've never met a Fender neck I didn't like. I've only met one Gibson neck I didn't like, and it was that 61 blade neck. And I have it on I have a 61 SG Special, and it's just a weird feeling, and I never really get used to it. I'll immediately put that 61 back on the wall and grab the 63 because I love the 63 necks. I love any Gibson 63 neck. I know that you get used to it. I never got used to it. So,
well, neck sizes are definitely personal preference. There's no question.
Yep. And now there's actually a 1961 generation Les Paul. This one, you'll go from a $300,000 down to about $25,000. You get the biggest price drop ever in vintage guitar world, and this because this Les Paul is no longer the Les Paul we know and love. It becomes this very thin cut, double cut design, thin mahogany with the beveled edges. Now these are great looking guitars, aren't they?
They are cool.
They are cool.
Yeah.
And they are tone machines, aren't they?
They are great. They resonate in your hands.
And so this is like, if you want a vintage guitar and you really are, and you got enough Stratocasters, getting one of these early SG Les Pauls, not a bad deal. Not a bad guitar. Some people don't like those sideways vibrolas. I don't know if they all come with those sideways vibrolas.
The first batch or so did have the sideways vibrola, but if you don't like it, you just don't use it.
Yeah, you just literally loop it. So I personally, I love specials. I like SG specials over the SG standards. And that's because it's a completely live at leads tone that I want through the kind of amps I play through. And to me, that SG special with the stop bar it's a monster. It's almost like a Telecaster as far as, raising the hair on the back of your neck when you play it. So
I agree.
So I tell people all the time, for $5K, $6K, look for SG specials. But if you're collecting, you got everything. It's not bad to have that first Les Paul SG. It's definitely worth money, and it'll always be worth money. So
for sure.
And that Les Paul Custom, we kind of touched on it. It's a nice, beautiful guitar, but that middle pickup will drive you nuts. But that's about $27,000 to $33,000 guitar. Definitely.
Yeah, and for some reason I bond more with that one than I do with my 58 3 pickup. So go figure. I don't know.
Well, it's the weight too. You're talking, and even though it's a little bit off balance, the neck is so nice on those SG customs that they're really, really fun to play.
Yeah.
So everything.
Awesome.
So now, we don't know why, but for some reason, the bean counters at Gibson said, well, we're not selling enough of these Les Pauls. They switched to that SG body style because it was 10 times cheaper to make. They could sell more of them. They could make them faster. It makes sense, but man, they didn't know that in 1968, everybody was looking for those whole single cut Les Pauls. Eric Clapton, Michael Bloomfield, guys had a lot to do with that, huh?
They sure did.
Yeah.
Yep. Everybody was looking for an old Les Paul.
Yep. So they do reintroduce the Les Paul Standard in 1968. And it has chrome parts instead of nickel plated. It's got the Indian rosewood instead of Brazilian, serial numbers or inked, not stamped. But it does have that small headstock. The first ones have the small headstock, and you'll have to pay about $22,000 now for one of these. These are like my hidden gems. I used to always tell people about 5-10 years ago, find those early gold tops from the late 60s. And now you can't. Everybody knows about them.
Yeah, they're gone.
They're gone.
They're in short supply.
People will pay 22 to 27 easy, and I've seen some people pay a little more than that because they are beautiful. If you get them, beautiful. About that same time, the Les Paul Deluxe is introduced, and this is when we start seeing those pancake, the 4-piece pancake body constructions with the maple thick up and down mahogany, layer of mahogany, thin maple, range pancake. They call them pancakes, and they get these mini humbuckers instead of the P90s. Now, these are rock and roll machines, aren't they?
They're awesome.
Yep. And,
they really are.
The gold.
Pete Townsend.
Yep. Bang, bang, bang with a number on it.
Yep.
You can pay up to $10K for these easy. The earliest ones, I always say, look for the gold tops. Those are the ones that will always go up in value. So that's cool. And then, of course, in 1969-ish, the Les Paul Custom also receives this pancake body construction, and it gets that volute. Why do people hate that volute?
I have no idea. They don't bother me at all.
Yeah, they don't, but it's just a look. It's just a reinforcement. Maybe it's the whole neck angle change type thing, the headstock angle change. I don't know. It's about that volute. They had to put that volute there. They kept cracking these things. People would lean them and crack them.
And however, I don't think the volute really did solve the head stock crack problem.
Yep.
So.
Yep. And then, of course, 69, they also reissue the Les Paul Standard in a 1954 spec, which is that wraparound bridge in the P90s. That one is kind of cool because it doesn't have the volute. That's the one that you see on the rock and roll, the Rolling Stones rock and roll circus that Brian Jones is playing, and we're just like,
Yeah.
you think it's like, oh, he's got a 54. No, it was actually a 59 or a 69.
Yeah, it's a cool guitar.
About 18, you pay about 20K, 18, 20K for that easy. And then, of course, 1971, we get into the 70s, the deluxes start getting the cherry sunbursts, and the price goes down from there. But man, you know what I've always wanted to find, and I can't find one that doesn't have a neck repair, are those sparkle bursts. Remember the 70s?
Those
70s?
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Oh man, and you have to pay a lot. You have to pay about 8-9K just for the ones that even have the neck fixes. The headstock fixes.
It's true.
Beautiful, beautiful guitars, and I've always been looking for one. And anybody out there who's got one, call me.
Yeah.
But of course, then 76. This is where most of us kind of enter the whole world of rock and roll when we all start buying our guitars and stuff. And those 76 Les Paul standards with the 4-piece pancake bodies and now we got the maple necks, and tunamatics and the great colors, the wine reds, the naturals, tobaccos. These are now, you can get these for about 5K, 6K, and those are great collector guitars, aren't they?
They are. I mean, they're getting pretty hefty by that point. They weren't really picking light mahogany, but they're great guitars. There's nothing wrong with them.
Yep. And so they're kind of like left this area that we call this the Norland era, 1971 to 85. The Norland era, and it's kind of like what we call the CBS era for Fender. It's just that there's less desirable, but you don't have any problem with some of this stuff. I know that you have a number of 70s through 80s Les Pauls that are all great guitars, right?
Yeah. I think they, for whatever reason, people look down on the Norland era, but they were building some quality guitars then, and they were also they continued the the factory seconds. I mean, they put the big word second on them instead of just the little 2 on the back of the headstock for earlier years. And you can find some that actually have no apparent blemishes or problems at some great values.
Now we got a few more minutes. You collect something that I've always wanted to do, and that are the anniversary Les Pauls. And that's because my very first Les Paul, when I was a teenager, was that 35th anniversary. The most beautiful. I remember walking into Moody Music on Garden Grove Boulevard, and it was up on the wall. And I remember I was just a teenager, and I remember I knew that I wasn't worthy. I almost had to look away from it because it was almost like you walk into the into the temple and you have to close your eyes, And I remember seeing, and I remember thinking at that time that was the most beautiful thing I ever saw in my life was that Les Paul. It was like a special. They must have gotten it. I'm sure they didn't want to sell it because it was the showcase. And that 35th anniversary was my one and only Les Paul for 30 to 35 years. Wow. That was all I needed because that's all I only, you know what I mean? It's just, it was a heavy thing. I remember if I played it live, it wasn't a whole set. You probably had it sitting back there and it was tuned to open E or something because it was a heavy guitar. But man, that thing with the Tim Shaw pickups was the greatest sounding, probably the closest I think that Gibson got to making a reissue that was with the original people and the original tooling that came the closest. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I have one. I agree with you very much. It's a great custom.
And, today they don't accrue a value the way like a real 57 would. But for 4 to 5K, I think it's better than anything you'd buy in that 4 to 5K range in a 70s Les Paul, right?
Totally agree. It's a really great value and a great sounding guitar.
So because I have that 35th anniversary, I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to collect all the Les Paul anniversary models. I never got there.
Cool.
But you've gotten them all. And I guess the first anniversary was this 20th anniversary custom from 1974. Beautiful guitar, huh?
Very nice. Yeah, I have a sunburst one.
Do they all come in sunburst? Actually, I guess they came in black and white.
No, they had black and white too.
I guess, so the sunburst ones, I mean, people out there looking, for 5K, that's about what you'd pay for it. Gorgeous guitar. It's a heavy guitar, no doubt. But it's got any of these anniversary things, they have an inlay that they put in I guess it's the 18th fret or the 15th fret, whatever it is.
Right.
And, the black and white one will be a little bit more, maybe $2,000 more. But man, that anniversary thing. And then in 1977, they came out with the 25th anniversary Les Paul. Same thing, about 4 or 5K. But these were gorgeous. These were silver, right?
Yes.
And
I had one of those. I did sell it, and again, I regret it. I regret every guitar I sold. And the nice part about that 25th anniversary was the lacquer yellowed, and so it kind of gave this, very unique, little bit of a greenish hue to the silver.
Kind of like the 79 12 25th anniversary Stratocaster. They all kind of turn that
right.
weird color.
Yeah.
And if you can get it in silver, it's something. It's worth something to somebody.
That's
and
right.
then in 78, they came out with what they call the 2550 anniversary. And the same thing about 5K. These are gorgeous guitars too, aren't they?
Yeah, well, and they've got the little, selector switch to, split the coils, which is really cool. And they're ornate, and they were special guitars at that period of time. It was for 25th year of the Les Paul and 50-year old Les Paul himself.
Yep, definitely. And then the 30th, I think I said it was the 35th, but it was, what I meant was the 30th anniversary is my 1982.
Oh, you had the 30th, the gold top?
Yeah, the gold top. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that's what I meant.
Yeah, I sold that one too, and I regret it.
Yep,
that was a great guitar.
Yep. And then in 1989, they came out with this 35th anniversary custom. Same thing, about 5K. Yeah. Beautiful guitar, but very heavy.
Yeah. I still have that one. I like it a lot.
Yeah. And then in 1991, they came out with this 40th anniversary, which is the cool one because it has the P90s on it. And it's got gold hardware. Very unique black guitar.
Actually, they're P100s.
P100s, I'm sorry.
And that guitar. And it is heavy as a log. Every one I have ever seen is no less than 12 pounds. I mean, they look great, but in my view, they're really heavy and they don't sound great.
Okay, but they're not expensive. They're about $2.5K.
Yeah,
people like it. And then in
nice wall hangers.
Yeah, they're gorgeous. Yeah. And then, of course, in 94, they came out with the Centennial Les Pauls. These are even cheaper, but some of them have really cool-looking tops, right?
Yeah, I'm curious about the price on that because, they have little diamond inlays in them. And
maybe I'm wrong.
They came with a ring, and they came with a full photograph of the guitar, a professional photograph that was framed. So I'm really surprised that they don't go for more.
Well, I'm the guy that puts the price on them. I could be totally wrong.
Yeah.
What do you think those are worth then?
Well, I mean, I have no idea, but I think that's low.
So maybe I need to revisit. I'm going to put a big asterisk next to that because I always learn. I'm always learning. And then, of course, we get the 40th anniversary, 59. That's probably the closest to that, what we call the R9 type, $5,000 easy, 1999. Beautiful tops on those.
That was a great year. And that was the year that one of the dealers talked Murphy into finishing some of them. So I have one of the 99s that he painted and aged from that year. I got a nice letter from him about that guitar. Yeah.
Doesn't he hide his initials in the checking?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And he wrote a letter, that went with the guitar because he was still off on his own. He wasn't working for Gibson Custom at that point.
Yep. And then in 2002, we get the 50th anniversary models. Now, these are expensive. These ones can cost you up to $10,000, but they are gorgeous tops. Inlays, the nice inlays, and the same thing. A lot of the bells and whistles on that one.
For sure.
And then, of course, there's I think the last one was that 2014 120th anniversary custom, about 5K. Beautiful quilted tops on some of these. Always love those, Yeah. So let's in the remaining time we have here, let's talk about of all their reissues. Which one do you think comes closest to the real thing?
Boy, that's so hard for me to answer. I mean, I think, in the 80s, the late 70s, early 80s, there was a period of sort of great experimentation, and this was just before the Kalamazoo plant ended. And so there were people that were ordering special runs like the Heritage 80s and the Jimmy Wallace and the Leos and the Guitar Traders and the Spotlight Specials. I have a bunch of all of those. I think they're cool guitars. They're well built. They play well. They look great. So I think it was, a period where there were a number of one-offs that were done as well.
These were made in Kalamazoo, all of these?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were. Heritage, I'm trying to remember the Heritage 80s, whether they were building them. I think they were. Those, as I recall.
I think they were.
There were, and then some of them were between factories. So like some of the Leos were built in Kalamazoo, and then they built some in Nashville, and the ones from Kalamazoo are more treasured, if you will. But I think they're all It's really hard for me to pinpoint any in the 70s, 80s that, I had a concern playing. I love playing them all. And as you said, that 40th anniversary of the 59 Les Paul in 1999, that was really kind of the spark that, has mushroomed all these reissue guitars since then.
One of the things I know that is that these ones that were done, the very last Les Pauls that were made in Kalamazoo, are highly revered. They were something magical about them, and that's why my 30th anniversary is in that bunch. There's something about them. There's like you were saying, and I think I get a lot of email from people saying that I've undervalued these in the book, and I think I really have. But you don't get sales data. It's impossible to find these things sell. And I tell people, if you can find these late Kalamazoo era Les Pauls that were made specialty for, like the Jimmy Wallace ones, and they are sleepers, no doubt about it.
No, and Ram, I'm amazed that you are even able to get, the amount of data that you have to update the guide, because, some of these are very rare, or people just aren't selling them. They've got them in their collections.
Yep.
So,
and that's the thing.
I think, if folks feed more information to you, that all the better,
I've been told by people that own these guitars is that, they always say you've undervalued it. And I was like, well, I have no data.
Yeah.
I have no data.
Right.
And I, like Jimmy Wallace and I talked about the Jimmy Wallace specials, and he did show me, he showed me the sales of what they sell for. And so, and next book, there will be an upgrade there. I do know more data. I do know more information now.
Yeah.
But I'm telling people all the time, like those Kalamazoo Les Pauls, special. Now, the big thing between a Kalamazoo and a Nashville, is it the bridge? They call that Nashville bridge. Is that how you know that your guitar was made in Nashville, because it has a Nashville bridge?
No, because they made some guitars in Nashville that, had the traditional ABR. But you can, you obviously go on the serial numbers and the pot codes and everything else. And then the serial number, the last 3 digits of the serial number below 500 are Kalamazoo, and above 500 are Nashville.
Right. Really interesting. I know you're busy, and Mike, you were like, why me? Why me? I'm like, because you're the guy. So this was fun. This was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pleasure being able to chat with you, Ram, and we can do it some more. And again, there's so much to cover, and I'd be happy to.
Yeah, and I think I think people in the future will come away from this knowing that I hope they learned something they didn't know yet. Whether it's about the 70s stuff, the 80s stuff, that's not bad. It's not bad. That Volute.
Well, what I'd invite you to do is come, to my studio, my sanctuary, and we could actually videotape some of these with you talking about them. That would be fun.
That's coming down the road. Everybody wants visuals with these podcasts.
Yeah.
Right now they're just audio, but everybody wants, they want to be able to see this stuff. They want to be able to hear this stuff, and that's coming for sure, for sure. And I will gladly take you up on that offer.
All right.
And we'll have some fun.
Good.
And we'll sit and watch the sun. I know you love sunrises and sunsets.
Right.
We'll sit and watch the sunset together.
Awesome.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ram.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Buy That Guitar, presented by Vintage Guitar Magazine. Please support VG for all they do for guitar players like us. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment on this podcast. I'd love to hear from you at ram@vintageguitar.com. See you again next week. Bye-bye.
The official Vintage Guitar Magazine 2025 price guide has partnered with 33 of the top guitar dealers in the industry to provide the most accurate values for thousands of models. This includes electric guitars, acoustic guitars, basses, amplifiers, effects, mandolins, and banjos. Whether your instrument is an investment or simply a piece you enjoy playing, it's always helpful to know what it's worth. If you're checking out a guitar at your local shop and want to know its value before making the purchase, this guide is your go-to source for all the details. Available in both print and digital editions, you can have the guide right at your fingertips no matter where you go. Use code BUYGUITAR25 to receive 15% off the 2025 price guide when purchased directly from www.vintageguitar.com. Offer expires April 1st, 2025.